Okay, great. Well, I guess as you've heard, today's topic is the miracle of life, human life. And if you can bear with me, I'm going to take you back to biology class and a little bit of first year med school. And we're going to tie in how medicine relates to God. So my goal is to impress upon you that the more we know about human life, the complexity of human life, the more obvious it is that only God could have created us. Amen. Yeah. So we are only here because God keeps us alive every day, and I'm going to try to give you some evidence of that. So we're going to start with some embryology, which is the development of the human in utero. This is called a zygote, and a zygote is, you might as well say, what we look like when we were our first day of life. The zygote is a fertilized egg. And I'll draw your attention to the center where we have what you call pronuclei. And the DNA from the male and the female meet and fuse together and form one nucleus, which has the DNA, the unique DNA of the new baby. Now, looking at a zygote, it doesn't really look very complex just looking at this picture. But I want you to realize how complex it is. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at the interior of a cell. Every cell in your body has similar components. Just like the body has different organs, various structures. Inside the cell, you have what they call organelles. And all of these little structures in there are very, very complex. For one thing, there's untold millions of chemical reactions occurring inside the cell at all times to keep the cell alive. So, in a way, to me, it's almost like looking up at the sky at night, at the stars, and we only have a primitive understanding of what's really out there. Similarly, if you look at this picture of a cell, we really only have a primitive understanding of what's in there at the microscopic level. So I want to talk about what I would consider the most important molecule in our bodies, DNA. DNA, you could think of as like a ladder, a twisted ladder, like a helix. And the rungs of the ladder are molecules called nucleic acids. And we basically have 4 nucleic acids, we'll just abbreviate, A, T, G, and C. And these letters, in a proper sequence, determine your genetic code, all of your genes. There's actually, it's believed that counting all the DNA of your 46 chromosomes, you have 6 billion nucleic acids that are arranged in just a proper sequence in order to determine your genes. The strands of the DNA are organized into 46 chromosomes, and the chromosomes have segments that are called genes, of which there's 25,000 genes in the human genome, the amount of genetic material in a human cell, 25,000. Now, when I'm talking about complexity, and you look at a simple diagram like this, it's somewhat deceptive. because all of our molecules are composed of atoms. So this is another picture of DNA. Hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, carbon are all put together in just the perfect way. If you look at those nucleic acids again, you can see the complexity of how all those atoms have to be just so to give those structures the proper shape. And so if you can imagine all those atoms, trillions of atoms lined up just perfectly in order to have the proper sequence for your genetic code, which determines all of your characteristics of the human body, to me it's just mind-boggling. Some might say there's no God. The trillions of atoms just randomly organize themselves into the 6 billion nucleic acids that somehow spontaneously line up in the proper sequences. But to me that's illogical, to believe all of this complexity could just spontaneously occur. To me, the more that is known about human life, especially on a molecular level, the more I believe the complexity is only possible because of God. So, back to embryology. By day 2, the zygote has divided into 4 cells, and it's exponential growth from there. 8 cells by 3 days, and so on. By the 6th day, you have a structure called a blastocyst. And realize all of these cells have the 46 chromosome nucleus formed on the 1st day. Now, looking at the blastocyst in more detail, you can see that more miracles have occurred. And by that I mean the cells from the 1st day have differentiated into different types of cells. So we have blastocyst cells called ectodermal cells that will differentiate into our skin and our nervous system. And endodermal cells differentiate into our GI cells, liver, and lungs. And mesodermal cells differentiate into muscle, bone, kidneys, blood, connective tissues. All of these cells have the same 46 chromosomes, but the remarkable thing is that on those chromosomes, certain genes are activated or deactivated, and this enables the differentiation of the cells into the different body parts. So by week 3 of human life, you start to see a human baby taking shape. And I think it's interesting, at that stage, we had a little tail, which goes away. Yeah. So by week 9, the baby basically has all of the structures the baby will ever have. You have formation of the heart, the brain, feet, fingers, toes. All of those structures are present at approximately week 9. Amazingly, we start out as one cell, and by the time we're born, we have 30 trillion cells. Yeah, that's with a T. So as this slide mentions, this is a little fetus at 9 weeks, 1 inch in length. All the features, limbs, hands, fingers, toes, nervous system is responsive, and many of the internal organs begin to function with with the high-tech ultrasound, they could actually see the heart beating at this stage. And so for the next 30 weeks, the baby grows in size. All those parts that were mentioned are just getting bigger and bigger and bigger until the 40th week, time for birth. But amazingly, nowadays with modern medicine, at approximately 22 weeks, 23 weeks, if the baby's born prematurely, the baby can survive. And this is a little preemie, 23 weeks. Unfortunately, at 23 weeks, only 25% actually survive. But by 27 weeks, 97% can survive. This is an ultrasound picture of our granddaughter. So that's Hazel at 21 weeks. Probably weighed about a pound. But so it's amazing to me just to even look at this. And then we saw her for Christmas running around in circles at age 3, and you just can't help thank God for her. So as I mentioned earlier, I think the more that doctors and scientists learn about human life, the more obvious it is that it's only God that could have created human life. And all this complexity I'm trying to explain is barely understood by man. It can only be understood by God. So this is a little baby girl playing with her nucleic acids. And the sequence, actually think about 6 billion of those building blocks. And they all have to be in just a perfect sequence for her to look like she does and have the characteristics that she does. But lucky for her, she's going to be a good runner. No baldness. 20/20 vision. So I'm going to switch gears here because I want to talk about some of the miracles of the human brain. And we'll first talk about anatomy of neurons, which are the cells that are in the human brain. And you can see the structures here. Think about tree branches. You have all these little branches from the cell body called dendrites. And these enable the neurons in your brain to connect to each other and communicate with each other. And then the neuron has a long branch called an axon. And this travels to different parts of your body. So down your spinal cord to your muscles, nerve impulse from the neuron will send electrical impulse to your muscle to make your muscle contract. And these little branches go throughout your body. Nerves communicate with each other by neurotransmitters. And last time we talked a little bit about serotonin and dopamine, and there's a bunch of other ones. These are little molecules that are released into the space between the nerve branches called a synapse. And somehow they trigger an electric impulse, nerve impulse, to travel down to the muscle or to other nerves. This is an interesting slide. And I'm bringing it up because I want you to appreciate the magnitude of these numbers, which is where God comes in. So in our brains, we have 96 billion neurons. And we have 10 trillion synapses. And the synapses enable, let's see, that would be a quadrillion. Yeah, it's a 1 followed by 16 zeros, calculations per second. So if you can imagine that number, and then start to imagine all the neurotransmitters that are involved in those synapses, it's just unbelievable. All of this computing power, forgot the axons, 100,000 miles of axons in the brain. And that distance is halfway between the Earth and the Moon. All those connections going on in your little brain. All of this computing power takes a lot of energy. And the brain is the most metabolically active part of your body. 20% of the oxygen that you breathe is consumed by the brain. 25% of the glucose that you burn is consumed by the brain. And yet the brain is only 2% of your body weight, approximately 3 pounds. It's interesting that male and female brains are somewhat wired differently. Oh, yeah. But think about the brain as having 2 hemispheres, and you have different lobes. And the frontal lobes, they deal with a lot of your personality, emotions, your reasoning, problem-solving ability. And posteriorly, the lobes deal with your vision and your balance. And laterally, the lobes deal with your hearing and your speech. So when you look at this, you can see that the male brain has more connections posteriorly, which might explain perhaps males having better, let's say, motor coordination. Females, more connections laterally, and therefore explaining why females are more verbal. Yeah. Here's a diagram showing functions of the different lobes. In the humans, compared to other species, a more developed frontal lobe, therefore better reasoning, problem-solving ability, and compared to most other species, more developed language, speech, and these other parts of the brain. I want to talk a little bit about some of the miracles that the brain performs with regard to speech and vision and hearing. Of all the species on earth, God only gave humans the ability to speak. And it's actually a pretty complex process to come up with words. We first have a thought that's generated by the front of the brain. The frontal lobe will send that thought to the middle of the brain where you have your speech center. And it's at that point that words are organized. And then axons from that speech center travel to the various muscles that deal with your ability to speak. So to speak, you have to contract your diaphragm, push air up through the lungs. The vocal cords muscles will contract and generate a sound. And then the sound waves travel into your oral cavity, and the muscles of your lips and mouth and tongue, soft palate, are closed, opened, raised, lowered, and that's how you come up with your words, your sounds that you make. And all of this is almost instantaneous if you think about it. Just as I'm talking here now, all those thoughts from my forebrain are organizing all the muscles to work just perfectly. So hopefully I'm making some sense. Now, a chimp is our closest species as far as DNA goes. And you look at the structures. The chimp would have vocal cords, tongue, lips, soft palate. But why can't a chimp speak? And that's because of the brain. We have the more developed forebrain, frontal lobes. We're able to organize our thoughts and develop the words. But out of all the species on earth, God only gave humans the ability to make those words and to speak. So let's talk a little bit about the miracle of vision. And I think the eye is pretty neat. You have the cornea and the lens able to focus the image on the back of the retina, just like a camera lens would do. And then you have nerve endings there that have axons that travel along the optic nerve to the back of the brain where we interpret what we are seeing. And you'll notice with this image here, by the time it gets to the retina, the flower is upside down. But because of the brain's computing power in the visual center, it's able to invert the flower right side up, as well as giving you a three-dimensional image. If your two eyes enable a three-dimension image, right side up, and even in color. I think it's fascinating that the eyes move in tandem. Each eye has 5, they call them extraocular muscles, and they move your eyeball up, down, right, left, and in and out. And you think about, if I'm looking at this pen right now and I'm moving it around, the brain is enabling both of my eyes to move just perfectly so that I only see one pen instead of having double vision. And all the computing power involved to do that, it's just, whew. So the complexity of being able to see and interpret what we're seeing is just hard to describe. You have the millions of neurons in the retina giving information to the millions of neurons in the posterior visual cortex, and that information is sent to your frontal lobe, and that's where you interpret what you're seeing. And all of this is happening instantaneously. Speaking of male and female differences, the Y chromosome is somewhat deficient. It's believed that a female can see many, many more shades of color than a male can. So when it comes to home furnishings and decorating, you let the female make the decisions. Now, I wanted to talk a bit about the miracle of hearing, and it's also quite complex. Sound waves will vibrate the eardrum, which vibrates 3 little bones in the middle ear, and these are connected to the cochlea, which is connected to your, I call it audio nerve, cochlear nerve. Now, the cochlea itself is full of little nerve endings, and actually they all have these little hair fibers in them. It's full of a fluid, and when the vibrations cause some vibration of that fluid, the little hair cells send off a message to the auditory nerve, which sends it to a part of the brain that interprets what you're hearing. So, I think I'll mention, you have to be careful with high decibels. If you're exposed to a lot of real loud sounds, you actually damage those little hair nerve fibers inside the cochlea, and they can have permanent loss, and that leads to hearing loss, especially high frequency hearing loss, which is one reason that men aren't always able to hear what their wives are saying. I have a chemistry background, so I'm going to put you through one chemical reaction, which I think is probably the most important chemical reaction that occurs in your body. And what this involves is glucose being burned for energy. So glucose being composed of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, combines with oxygen that we breathe, combined with water that we drink. 16 enzymatic reactions will burn that glucose, break it down into carbon dioxide and water, and this produces energy. To me, the most miraculous part of that is realizing that these 16 enzymatic reactions have to occur just perfectly in the right sequence. It's almost like an assembly line. The different breakdown products go from one to the other until you wind up with the carbon dioxide and oxygen. And it's also miraculous if you think about, okay, those 16 reactions occurring in millions of molecules of glucose being burned every second in all of the cells in your body. All of the 30 trillion cells in your body. Well, we've talked a little about the complexity of DNA and neurons and cells. We've barely scratched the surface as to how complex the human body is. If you think about all the atoms that have to be precisely organized in our molecules, in our trillions of cells, it's just unbelievable to believe that it doesn't happen because of God. And it isn't just that we are a bunch of molecules in a bag of skin. We are alive, and thanks to God, each individual cell in our body is alive. I'm going to leave you with this thought. Do miracles of God still happen today? And obvious answer is yes. I'm able to stand here, see you, talk to you, hear you, because of all the complex miracles that are occurring instantaneously. Of course, it's miraculous that beautiful babies who start out as that one-cell zygote are born every day. But then again, a chimpanzee's alive, a dog and a cat's alive, an ant is alive. The icing on the cake for us is that we are the only species on this planet that has the ability to worship our Creator. And we are the only species on this planet that can be spiritually alive as well as physically alive. And I'd like to finish up with this Bible verse. For by him all things were created, all things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible. All things were created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. Yeah. Thank you.
Hey, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
For sharing that with us.
Yes.
Absolutely. So are we guinea pigs?
Yes.
Well, I feel very honored for your first time sharing this.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, if you guys want, I could email it to you.
Yes. Could you email it and I can email it out to the church?
Okay, sure.
We recorded this, and so I'll email the PowerPoint out with the recording.
Okay.
With your permission.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.